Gentlemen, welcome to Regrettable Tales in Redemptive Music, the last Gasp 2016. Stories a little too familiar for comfort. The right time.
The hotel's dining room was dressed in black for dinner, accessorized with the twinkle of tabletop LED tea lights. Rupert entered, employing the quietest of belofered comportment, which nonetheless caused the dutiful waiter to materialize before him. "Table for two, sir?" "My wife will not be joining me," came Rupert's retort. He hadn't prepared what he would say, but the reply flowed surprisingly easily and said all that needed to be said to a waiter. Of course, he mused, if the waiter had instead been a marine biologist, he might have answered, "No, she will not. My wife was, this very afternoon, attacked and eaten by a large great white shark while snorkeling just off the jetty." He made a mental note just then that he must get around to delivering that very message to the police and even to Ellen's family at his earliest convenience.
Career path.
More than anything else in the world, Ruth desired a recording contract. If things were not difficult enough in the music business, she had not the slightest talent for singing, nor could she play an instrument of any description, neither did she have the desire to learn or practice, and her frustration grew with each unmusically passing day. That was until she woke up and smelled the future roses and recast her goal to that of becoming an ice road trucker. Surely the acquisition of a trucker's license, despite her dread fear of motor conveyances, as well as the mastery of basic reading, could not be as significant a roster of impediments as those imposed by the music industry.
Naked truth.
Without the depth to appreciate women close in age to himself, Rupert instead fixed his interest upon Tiffany, whose tautness and charms were the unearned dividends of her evident youth. Unfortunately, Tiffany was actually Martha, whose many reparative surgeries had stayed both the hands of time and the pull of gravity, and tonight would be their first date. If it all went well, it would be their last, as anyone who sees her unclothed body must die. Probably a good thing.
Recovery.
Although the drug in question was not in vogue any longer, Charity had just discovered its pleasures and was quickly hooked. Embarrassed by her uncool habit, she admitted instead to sex addiction, although she hadn't had a lover in over 8 months, and hoped to address her substance issue in rehab as a mere side note.
Unibrow.
Unilateral, unitard, Unitarian, unisex, unicycle, unibrow, universe. Dr. Fedelson had labored for 3 decades, and now the united field theory, physics elusive theory of everything, was laid bare through the good offices of a simple bottle of tequila.
Members only.
Shelley had no idea that a man could fit his private part in there, no less leave it behind for her to discover some weeks later.
Newfound perspective.
Only now, and a moment too late, Oscar knew better. At least the chainsaw, as it was choked with flesh, had stopped running.
Did us part.
Olivia's physician, Dr. Plottenmeyer, delicately informed her that the mass of moribund flesh at her side, while worrisome, was her 4th husband, Herbert, who she mistakenly remembered divorcing in 2009.
Flyboy.
Sedentary, subsists mainly on sweetened beverages, communicates only by email, preoccupied with Pong, avoids sunlight, fancies neither loved ones nor lovers, and is perfectly satisfied with a sex life consisting of self-abuse fueled by anime obsession. The black Suburban whisked a bewildered Bruce to NASA headquarters for the next 20 years of his life, and to his entirely unexpected place in history, for you see, Bruce had, for the upcoming solo Mars mission at least, the right stuff.
Resolute.
Ooh, it's a holiday story. Hold on. While scoring more crack in 2017 was a goal, Jane felt that it was not, however, an appropriate New Year's resolution. For one, it lacked any suggestion of a mechanism for acquiring said crack, like getting a job, and also absent were any note of sacrifice and spirit of self-improvement that all worthwhile resolutions should be imbued with. She would have to try again. I will do less crack in 2017? Somehow, it just didn't sound right.
SCOTUS.
Observing a recent bout of lethargy suffered by his dog Claudius, Gerald telephoned the veterinarian, who suggested that Gerald visually inspect the hound's bowel movements for any evidence of a probable cause. It took but a moment in the yard where Claudius left his poop to discover the roots of the malady. Claudius had defecated admittedly poor likenesses of the current 8-seated Supreme Court members on a snowy shelf afforded by a stone planter. The poor quality of the sculptures notwithstanding, the effort required for the dog to fashion them certainly explained his well-deserved fatigue.
The mission.
The Clarksons lived in what they used to call a garden apartment in Clifton Park. They later referred to it simply as an apartment, and more recently, tellingly, their home. Dad worked at a body shop, Mom at Bed Bath & Beyond. Bobby attended grade school and excelled at football, and Grandpa stayed home to mind the two beams of light that came down in more or less vertical shafts near the dinette, and which he must, by constant mind control, prevent from crossing, lest all life on Earth be annihilated. And that's happening in Clifton Park right now. You knew something good happened. It's got to be a reason to live there. Right?
Clean sweep.
Charles, for whom shower time was a time for ideas, realized while performing today's ablutions that he could not remember washing at all from the years 1983 to 2003. He could not even remember seeing, no less setting foot in or turning on the shower for that 20-year period. He was later relieved to recall that all of his memories of that pair of decades had actually been wiped by an unseen hand from his mind.
After school.
Romy dropped little Jim Jr. at karate, giving his gi a playful, tightening tug for good luck. Then off to lacrosse with Emily, making certain that her socks terminated at the same altitude before minivanning across town to deposit recalcitrant Clara onto the piano bench for her 4 o'clock lesson, which left just the right amount of time to squirt through traffic and deliver her little baseball player Max to his waiting, already bat-swinging instructor. A normal day, but made a bit sad, as she had no intention whatsoever of picking any of them up ever again. It's the last play date.
Fairy tale.
Sleazy, raunchy, easy, trashy, tawdry, lowly, and cheesy had discovered on their daily walk in the woods a sleeping Snow White. They approached her soundlessly on felt-booted little feet, and just when they were in stubby-armed, mucky-handed reach of her temptingly pink dress, the 7 busybody do-gooder dwarves showed up. Just in time, it turned out, to save the day and to avert a scene that would hardly have become an appropriate children's tale.
Hers not.
Piper's physician had prescribed, in order to bring some measure of relief to her painfully clogged sinus cavities, the use of a neti pot. After a few very awkward attempts, which did little more than flood the front of her nightgown, the little vessel evacuated itself successfully into her left nostril. That first flush produced the string of mucus, which was followed by a plug of somewhat horny mixed organic material, the sight of which alarmed her. Piper's shock soon surrendered to intrigue, tempting her to fill the pot again and to revisit the same nose hole. This time, however, what flowed out was, in this order, a fetal mammal of some kind, a single grayish 5mm freshwater pearl, a Capodimonte Last Supper figurine, and lastly, an escalation, including the deployment of armored divisions and the use of airstrikes of the sectarian conflict in Afghanistan. She considered the potential international implications of subsequent nasal irrigations carefully before treating the right nostril. I think we should make her Secretary of Defense, don't you? With a nose like that. Okay.
Total recall.
On the glowing laptop screen in the fetish section of a popular porn site, Bill discovered galleries filled with images of himself in lewd performance with his male carrier Amy, an unfamiliar male sanitation engineer, and an amorous alpaca, to whom he himself appeared to be handcuffed. His dismay was palpable, as he had neither memory nor knowledge of any of them or the incident. Later, after a cocktail, with further reflection and when the shock of the discovery had worn off, the alpaca did ring a bell.
Family Way.
In 2011, learning to set traps for wild boar, Herbie was rent asunder by one of the beasts. In 2012, Jeanette met an untimely demise when her overalls became entangled in the shaft of the manure spreader. More recently, Jeremy was completely liquefied while bronze melting. Undeterred by their deaths at 6, 5, and 4 years of age respectively, the Hendersons, ardent proponents of homeschooling, began adoption proceedings for 3 new, hopefully luckier children.
Topless.
Trudy, a member of the country club for 23 years and frequenter of its swimming pool, had held her tongue about many other violations, but this new bather must be reported for his variations from pool etiquette, safety, and hygiene. For his part, Jacques had already contemplated leaving, as for one, he was beginning to feel unwelcome, and in addition, the sun was beginning to taunt his exposed brain.
Remote chance.
In the way too early winter darkness of the family room, enlivened only by the kinetoscopic glow of Family Feud on the big screen TV, Heather trained the remote upon her quiescent husband Bradley and spiritlessly squeezed random buttons in the vain hope of effecting some kind of change.
Always something.
Without question, today's was the best view Manny had ever had from an airplane seat, and he was in the center aisle, no less. The whole spinning about, losing a wing, and fuselage rent asunder right in front of him thing were all undeniably distracting, though.
Mirror, mirror.
The roiling pink and gray flesh, eyes on tender, violently jerking stalks, hair whose follicles had coalesced into stout, moist, rubbery tentacles, a mouth with lips draped loosely over a yellowed, cracked tusk, and leathery, forked, prehensile ears. The mirror didn't lie. Rupert had certainly let himself go.
Size matters.
Nice read. Mrs. Timmis had described one as being as big around as Napoleon Bonaparte's chief astrologer's gallstone. Mr. Clatterer said, half the diameter of an adult tapir's testicle, and his wife added, they were approximately the width of a seed from the African Entataridi plant. What at first was a meteorological investigation of the hailstorm of June 2012 in Germantown, New York, was quickly becoming the study of a town populated with persons who used extremely obscure units of measurement.
In common.
Jerry of Crossing Falls, Indiana, pondered Paul, who lived in an earth-toned clay parallelogram on whose walls hung haphazardly attached pages of undecipherable advertising. Paul, who squintingly smoked alone and in groups, who pointed while laughing to gaily printed food packaging, and who posed in tightly balled fists of formidable men and women, and who today posted a picture of himself hoisting an AK-47 in his left hand while blithely kissing a decapitated human head held by the hair in his right. And to think, were it not for Facebook, they might never have become friends.
Fine china.
The most clever thing was not that Mandy had mastered Cantonese so perfectly and at such a young age, but that she had gradually and effectively convinced her parents that it had been their own native tongue in which they had become, for unknown reasons, illiterate.
Deep cover.
Although gone for over 2 years, Zoe's search for ancient artifacts had not taken her further than Marshall's Home Accessories Department. And the dog-eared letters describing her dig site encampment had instead been weathered at and sent from the nearby Sunsetter Trailer Park. She would soon return home to her husband and 8 children, but was, in truth, no more an archaeologist than an agent with the CIA, which would very soon call her into extended undercover service abroad.
Get real.
Lillian was dismayed that television, founded upon its portrayal of fake realness, was now nearly exclusively programming shows celebrating real fakeness. She called her local network to complain and became a guest on their non-news broadcast. She was then offered her own reality show, on which, along with a gaggle of new fake friends, she grudgingly accepted to appear.
Advanced.
Myra found herself alone with Professor Gerber at the college mixer. He fixed an empty expression upon her, and his mouth opened into an out-of-place grimace. His jaw jerkily ratcheted fully downward, and out sprang a tongue, which, in coincidence with his eyes, began to spin, flecking her face with foul spittle. She turned on her heels and returned to the party, shaken by what she would argue was a very inappropriate professor-student interaction.
Going the distance.
It was Ramon's first internet-incubated date, and striding towards the table where Carol was already seated, he saw that, to his delight, she looked as comely in person as in her profile picture. Sadly, however, he found that her appearance did not hold up to closer inspection. 3 months together now, and excuses for being far enough away from her to find her attractive were wearing thin, and in any case, the situation was rendered even more impractical due to the fact that he was hard of hearing.
Bad patch.
Tell me again why I shouldn't be feeling like a scapegoat right now, asked Jean, just as the Captain Blackbeard's saber tip coaxed him from the end of the plank. He never resurfaced at all, and after disappearing, bound ankles and wrists into the inky, roiling sea, which was okay for his shipmates, who never wanted to see him again after his unpirate-like final words.
Of substance.
Bram Stoker had never ventured as far as the Carpathian Mountains, and yet was revered for writing about them with dark eloquence in his classic Dracula. And Ray Bradbury had created his important Martian Chronicles without, of course, ever setting foot on that faraway red planet. So why, thought Carl, all the excitement over his having penned mere prescriptions for Percocet, Klonopin, Vicodin, without the formality of having stepped foot in medical school?
Aspiration.
Today, upon awakening, Lewis sat up in bed and charted a path that would take him to the 7-Eleven shop, where he would pick up a quart of ice cream and rolling papers before returning home to his couch, bag of seedy pot, and streaming kung fu movies. A grand plan for an adventurous spirit, yet he had tried many times before and failed.
Base 10.
Johnny stared at his unemployed hands, turning them over and over again, like he was cooking them with his eyes. 5 fingers on each hand, 2 hands make an even 10. That metric system wasn't so hard to figure out after all. A big bubble popped in his beer, taking the rest of the head and this new realization down with it.
Look sharp.
Marvin didn't even know that they made loose razor blades anymore. Finding a brand new one there in his freshly laundered sock only added to the mystery.
Hit parade.
In hope of forestalling the beating he was certain his classmates were inclined to deliver when he arrived at school, Neil struck himself about the face, head, and torso in their full view. Tragically, they had been momentarily distracted by a popular student.
Glazed over.
While recognizing that a detour might undo his efforts, Hector nonetheless could not help but succumb to temptation. He left his place in the throng, causing noteworthy disturbance. Filled with righteous consternation. Why would anyone plan a marathon route that passed a Dunkin' Donut shop? Especially one but 300 scant yards from the starting line.
Bad trip.
Does everything about you people have to be so fucking spiritual? 2 days in the field among the UPT people, and Andrea had discovered the limits, both of her patience and of any interest she might have had in her hastily chosen field of cultural anthropology. Come on, you wanted to say that. Come on. You listen to NPR, come on.
New wing.
Upon winning the Nobel Peace Prize in Physics for deftly circumventing the observer effect in particle physics and quantum mechanics, Cletus Joplin stated, "I guess I just sneaks up on 'em kinda quiet." Notably, his field of study was neither physics nor even chemistry, but chickens.
Beat it.
60% of American women surveyed masturbate twice weekly. Can I get a show of hands? No, sorry. Emily thought this preposterous, and furthermore, that Time magazine was no place for such unnecessarily salacious content. She decided to unleash the resulting umbrage at her husband Egbert when he returned from the restroom. Emily continued reading the already offending article. 1 in 4 men, according to the same study, was masturbating right now. See, 1 in 4. You see, 1, 2, 4, 4. That's a lot. That's a lot of masturbating. Giant Poisonous centipedes were not the most popular tourist souvenir, but Lewis had had patience, no competition, and not a single customer complaint on record. They make great pets, by the way.
Dope.
Cat pondered her countenance, that of an unemployed eater of juvenile breakfast cereal trapped in the bowl of an uncharred tablespoon. There was a time when she thought that the drugs had kept her from achieving her goals, and now, 20 years on, she missed their effects and trappings, but mostly their ready excuse.
And dangerous.
Felicia was having one of those days. Unfortunately, she also had a chemical weapons stockpile.
Past tense.
Listening to classical music, petting a dog, a short pony ride, puffing a fine cigar, playing hacky sack, engaging in a telephone call from a friend, sipping a glass of bourbon, and a brisk autoerotic exertion. Each were supposed to relieve stress, but alas, they were not working. Next time, thought Herbert, he would try just one at a time. I want to see all your mental pictures, all your mental pictures.
So special.
Penny's law had just been signed, due in no small part to the tireless lobbying of her parents, Jean and Clarence. An amazing accomplishment, as Penny was neither sick, injured, deceased, nor had she been wronged in any way at all.
Split decision.
Lourdes found her sister Summer's ways generally reprehensible, but hastened to be harsh towards her, as Summer was also in possession of a really small temper, the keys to their home, and was, after all was said and done, her conjoined twin. Thank you, everybody. Another break with the beautiful DJ Truemaster.